Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled People's Story. I still remember the day my sister called me, her voice shaking with a mixture of shock and controlled fury. It was a Wednesday afternoon, and I was knee-deep in paperwork at my office when my phone lit up with her name. "They fired me," she said, her usually confident voice uncharacteristically small. "That new manager actually fired me." My sister and I have always been close. 4 years apart, I've watched her overcome obstacles that would crush most people. Born with spinal muscular atrophy, she's used a wheelchair since childhood, but her mind has always been her greatest asset. With a double master's in business administration and computer science, she's brilliant in ways I could never hope to be. Our parents built a successful software development company specializing in accessibility solutions for businesses. When they passed away 3 years ago in a car accident, they left the company to my sister. Most people would have immediately stepped into the CEO role, but not her. She wanted to understand the company from the ground up before taking the reins officially. "I need to know how it actually works," she told me at the time, "not just how people tell the boss it works." So she created a brilliant plan. The board knew her identity, of course, but she would work in various departments under her middle name, learning each aspect of the business firsthand. Her plan was to spend a year this way before officially stepping into leadership. The company was being managed by the existing executive team in the interim, with oversight from the board. "What happened?" I asked her that day, already feeling my blood pressure rising. "That new department manager, the one I told you about last month. She's been making my life difficult since she started, but today she went nuclear. Fired me in front of the entire development team for excessive absences and disrupting workflow with special accommodation requests." Special accommodation requests. My sister's special requests included things like having her desk at the proper height for her wheelchair and bathroom breaks when she needed them due to her medication schedule. She said, "What?" I nearly shouted into the phone. She said, and I quote, "People like you are a resource drain on productive team members." Then she had security escort me out like I was a criminal. I was already grabbing my car keys. "I'm coming over. Then we're going straight to the board." "No," my sister said firmly. "I don't want to handle it that way." "What do you mean? This woman just discriminated against you in front of witnesses. She's violated about 8 different employment laws." "I know," my sister replied, and I could hear the tactical mind I admired so much kicking into gear. "But this presents an opportunity. If she's doing this to me, she's doing it to others. And if the company culture allows someone like her to rise to management, there's a systemic problem that simply firing one person won't fix." I sat back down in my chair, listening. "I need your help," she continued. "You're a corporate attorney. I need you to help me document everything and build a case. Not just against her, but to identify every policy and practice that's enabled this behavior." That conversation was the beginning of what would become the most satisfying professional experience of my life. Over the next few weeks, my sister and I worked meticulously. With her technical expertise, we set up secure ways to gather evidence and testimonies from current and former employees. I was shocked at what we discovered. The manager, who I'll call Karen because that's exactly what she was, had a history of pushing out employees who required any kind of accommodation. Before targeting my sister, she had managed to edge out a man with hearing loss by consistently forgetting to provide written materials for meetings, then reprimanding him for not keeping up. She had transferred a pregnant employee to a position that required constant standing, then documented her performance issues when she needed to sit occasionally. The pattern was clear, and it went beyond Karen. The company's HR department had repeatedly failed to intervene despite multiple complaints. There was evidence that certain executives valued Karen's ability to maintain what they called team efficiency without questioning her methods. My sister was particularly disturbed to learn about a talented developer with ADHD who had been placed on a performance improvement plan for lack of focus after requesting permission to use noise-canceling headphones during specific high-concentration tasks. "This isn't the company our parents built," she told me one night as we reviewed documents. "They founded this business specifically to create accessible technology. How did we end up with managers who don't even understand basic accommodation laws?" I didn't have a good answer. My sister's face hardened with resolve. "We're not just going to fix the Karen problem," she said. "We're going to rebuild the entire culture." 2 months after her firing, we had compiled enough evidence to present a comprehensive case. Emails, performance reviews, recorded meetings in one-party consent state, witness testimonies, and exit interviews all painted a damning picture. Meanwhile, Karen had been busy solidifying her position, taking credit for projects my sister had completed before being fired and presenting them as her own innovations. She had restructured the development team, pushing out 2 more employees who had been supportive of my sister. The board called a quarterly strategy meeting, and my sister decided this would be the moment to reveal herself and present our findings. As the company's majority shareholder, she had every right to attend, though she hadn't participated actively during her undercover period. The morning of the meeting, I accompanied my sister to the company headquarters. The security guard at the front desk, who clearly hadn't been informed of the situation, looked confused when she presented her ID. "I need to call up about this," he said. A few minutes later, Karen herself came striding through the lobby, her face a mask of professional concern that didn't reach her eyes. "There must be some confusion," she said with a thin smile. "Former employees aren't permitted at board meetings, or on company property at all, actually." My sister remained perfectly calm. "I believe there is indeed some confusion, but not on my part." Karen's smile tightened. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave before this becomes a security issue." I started to step forward, legal threats forming on my lips, but my sister placed a hand on my arm. "I've been invited by the board," she said simply. "But if you'd like to take this up with them, we can certainly all go up together." Something in her tone must have given Karen pause. She glanced at her watch, then at the security guard who was watching the exchange with interest. "Fine," she said after a moment. "But I'll be noting this disruption." The boardroom was already half full when we arrived. Several executives looked up in surprise when my sister wheeled in. A few seemed to recognize her, despite her having kept a relatively low profile during her time working in various departments. Karen immediately went to the CFO, bending to whisper something in his ear while glancing back at us. He frowned, then shook his head slightly and motioned for everyone to take their seats. The meeting began with standard quarterly reports. Karen's presentation came midway through the agenda, and she delivered it with polished confidence. She outlined the efficiency improvements she'd made in the development department, the dead weight she'd trimmed, and the projects she'd accelerated. Several of these projects were ones my sister had personally designed and substantially completed before being fired. When Karen concluded, the board chair thanked her and then said, "I believe we have one more presentation today from a shareholder perspective." This was the cue we'd arranged. My sister wheeled forward and I connected her laptop to the presentation system. "For those who don't know me," she began, "my name is OP's sister. My parents founded this company 27 years ago. When they passed away 3 years ago, I became the majority shareholder." Karen's face went through a fascinating transformation, from confusion to disbelief to something approaching horror. For the past year, I've been working within various departments to understand our operations from the ground level, most recently in the development team under the management of our colleague here. She nodded toward Karen, whose complexion had taken on a grayish tint. "This unusual approach has given me insights that I believe are crucial to our future," my sister continued. "Unfortunately, some of those insights are deeply troubling." For the next 30 minutes, she methodically presented the evidence we'd gathered: the systematic discrimination, the hostile work environment, the wrongful terminations, the legal exposure the company now faced due to these actions. Throughout the presentation, board members' expressions ranged from shock to anger to profound concern. Karen attempted to interject several times with explanations and justifications, but each time my sister calmly presented another email, another recorded comment, another testimony that directly contradicted Karen's claims. "This isn't personal," she said, though we both knew that wasn't entirely true. "This is about the future of our company and whether we're living up to the principles on which it was founded." When she finished, there was a heavy silence in the room. The board chair cleared his throat. "I think we need to discuss this situation immediately in a closed session. Karen, would you excuse us?" "This is ridiculous," Karen said, gathering her papers with shaking hands. "These allegations are completely without merit. I've done nothing but improve performance metrics since taking this position." "By violating the Americans with Disabilities Act?" I asked mildly. "By creating a hostile work environment? By wrongfully terminating employees based on protected characteristics? Those performance metrics will look fantastic in the class action lawsuit we're prepared to file." Karen's face flushed. "You can't possibly—" "We absolutely can," my sister interrupted. "But I'd prefer not to. This company means too much to me to drag it through a public legal battle. What I want is systematic change starting today. The board asked Karen to leave, which she did after one final attempt to defend herself. The closed session lasted nearly 3 hours. My sister presented her vision for restructuring the company's management, revamping the HR department, and implementing comprehensive training on disability accommodations and inclusive leadership. By the end of the day, Karen had been terminated for cause, with no severance package. The board unanimously approved my sister's proposed changes, including the creation of a new executive position focused specifically on workplace inclusion and accessibility. The following weeks were intense. My sister officially took her position as CEO, and we began the process of reaching out to employees who had been pushed out under Karen's management. Many returned, including the developer with ADHD, who turned out to be one of the most innovative thinkers on the team once properly accommodated. The company implemented new policies requiring all managers to undergo training on disability accommodation laws and inclusive leadership practices. Performance metrics were redefined to prioritize innovation and collaboration over arbitrary standards that disadvantaged disabled employees. 6 months later, the company culture had transformed. Productivity actually increased, contrary to Karen's philosophy, as employees felt more valued and supported. The company launched a new accessibility consulting division that quickly became a significant revenue generator, working with other businesses to improve their own practices. One afternoon, my sister called me into her office. "Look at this," she said, turning her monitor toward me. It was a job application for a mid-level position at one of our subsidiary companies. The applicant was Karen. "She doesn't know we review all management track applications," my sister explained. I felt a surge of vindictive pleasure. "Perfect opportunity for some payback." My sister gave me a look. "That's not how we operate." "You're not seriously considering hiring her?" "Of course not, but we're not going to be unprofessional about it either." She drafted a standard rejection letter, the same one sent to any unqualified applicant. No mention of the past, no petty comments, just a straightforward, "Your qualifications don't match our current needs." "That's it?" I asked, somewhat disappointed. "That's it," she confirmed. Success is the best revenge, and we're definitely succeeding. She was right. In the year since Karen fired my sister, not knowing she was actually terminating the company's owner, our stock price had increased by 32%. Employee retention had improved dramatically. The company had been featured in business publications as a model for inclusive workplace practices. Karen, meanwhile, had struggled to find equivalent employment after word got around about her management style and the circumstances of her termination. The last we heard, she had taken a position significantly below her previous level at a struggling startup. My sister never publicly shared the full story of her firing and return. She didn't need to. She had transformed a painful experience into an opportunity to make fundamental improvements to the company our parents built. The policy changes she implemented didn't just benefit her, they created a genuinely accessible workplace for dozens of talented professionals who might otherwise have been pushed aside. I learned something important from watching her handle this situation. When faced with discrimination, the easy path is immediate retaliation. The harder but ultimately more rewarding approach is systematic change. My sister didn't just want Karen punished, she wanted to build something better. And that's exactly what she did. The next one is a pro-revenge story, just flipping through a few stories and reading a butt entitled "Drivers Getting Their Just Desserts." This made me think back to my days as a paramedic. We got a call to a house where there was a bariatric patient who had fallen. The patient was morbidly obese and weighed around 30 stone, 420 pounds. This story isn't really about them, though. There are many reasons people get to this size, and I've never judged, only helped. No, the problem here was a really arrogant neighbor we had come across before, and boy was this chap a judgmental moron. Our patient had a car and had a disabled parking permit. They also had a council-designated disabled parking spot outside their home, which the neighbor kept parking in. There had been a number of letters from the council regarding this, and a number of parking fines just served to annoy this chap even more. On the day of the story, I took the call that the patient had fallen and we went to the house. Sure enough, the neighbor was not only parked in the disabled spot, but had parked a second car blocking access to the patient's driveway. I assessed the patient and suspected they had a broken hip, so needed to go in. I sent my colleague round to the neighbor to ask them to move the cars, and when they came back, I was told the neighbor had just told my colleague to do one. No problem. Time to get the message home. I radioed through to our control center and asked for the fire service and police. We needed the fire service to help lift the guy and the police to do a little parking control. The fire service were the first to arrive, and I spoke to the crew commander to let them know what the situation was. A fireman went to the house to ask the neighbor to move the car and was told the same as my colleague. The message was relayed back, and the watch commander just asked me one question. Is the patient's life at risk? I knew exactly where this was going, and it was time our thoughtless neighbor got the message. My answer was yes. There is equipment I need to get into the house, and the driveway is blocked, preventing me doing so. The watch commander told the fire truck driver to move those vehicles. It was really satisfying to see both vehicles being pushed down the road by the fire service, and the look on the neighbor's face as he came out spitting and screaming was well worth seeing. His complaints to the police fell on deaf ears. They were well aware of his history of obstruction, and my clinical assessment that the patient's life was in danger was more than enough justification for the vehicles to be moved. I doubt it made our patient's life any easier, and sadly they died a few months later without leaving hospital, but it really did bring a smile to their face as we wheeled them out. The next one is a malicious compliances story. I have moved in an apartment with a roommate last summer. When we first came in, the biggest part of the sale was the fact that the apartment was freshly renovated and soundproof. This one is important, and you'll see why. So when we got in, my roommate immediately fell in love with it, and I was too. When we moved in, we were very careful not to bother anyone, as we wanted to quickly have a good relationship with our neighbors. Oh, did you see the new neighbors? They only move during the day. They don't make sound during the night. What nice people. Kind of deal. And we can safely say it worked. What we did not know, however, is that we were only 3 renters when we first came in. Us on the floor, another family upstairs on the opposite side, and another one on the 3rd floor with one empty apartment between us. Turns out the soundproof statement was accurate, but only in regards to the inside to outside situation. When our upstairs neighbors moved in, it was a goddamn nightmare. Sound from 5 a.m. to past midnight, 5 days in a row, dropping stuff, speaking loudly, yelling, or walking in their apartment with shoes on. Out of frustration on the 5th day, I walk upstairs and meet my neighbor at midnight. I ask them to cease their activities for the night. I have work in the morning, and I cannot be kept up all night. I understand they were freshly moved in, and they might have had a tight schedule, but midnight was too late to be moving stuff. He didn't reply and closed the door on me. I go downstairs, and the sound starts over again. I notify my landlord, and he tells me he'll handle it, and apologized for the situation, explaining to me my neighbor was just moving, and that he probably didn't understand what I was saying because of language barrier. The neighbors were extremely loud. I know a lot of Karen will use that as an excuse to shower their neighbors with hate, but when I say loud, I mean it. There was no stop to their loud noises. It seemed like they couldn't be bothered to hold something without dropping it, or jumping up and down on the floor, or purposefully banging the bed frame against the wall when having sex. I recorded the event, and even install microphones in my home jacked to my computer, activating and recording every time there is strong vibration in the house. Over 98 events on Monday, February 14th. I was livid. I send that to the landlord and explain this cannot continue. First, the apartment was poorly soundproofed, which meant we were hearing every damn sound at all time. Second, we had notified the neighbors about the situation, and they have ignored it. I have notified the landlord to awaken them to our situation. I report the issues several times, and even advise my landlord that there were very heavy-sounding thuds coming from upstairs, which worried me. He answered with, "Stop complaining about your neighbors already. I have other things to do." I have answered. "Understood, sir. Please be advised, this will be my last communication in action to help you in that regard." You know when I said I had loud bangs? Turns out our upstairs neighbor was doing bench press lifting in his living room, and the heavy thuds I kept hearing was him dropping his weights on the ground. I had warned my roommate about removing anything she didn't want broken from the living room, and lo and behold, 4 days later, the first crack appeared. Then another. The floor was giving up. I moved the couch out of the way and moved the TV and consoles into the bedroom. Fast forward to 3 days ago. After another series of loud bangs, I had a loud crack, followed by a "oh duck," followed by very loud noises. I went to the living room to see my neighbor on the ground with several actually gruesome injuries due to the fact he just went through the floor and brought his bench and weight rack with him. I called an ambulance and the police. The police asked me if I reported the issue with my landlord, which I could confirm, due to my communications being made via email. I sent everything, and I am now, of course, filing to break my lease due to uninhabitable dwelling. The landlord came in yesterday and just proceeded to explode. Told me I should have made him aware that my neighbor was doing dangerous things, to which I answered I had notified him about the very loud sounds and he never investigated, and that he also ordered me to stop complaining about my neighbors. It was not my responsibility to go out of my way to protect his assets if he is unwilling to cooperate with me. My neighbor's roommate and I are now residing in a hotel until we can find a a new place to live. We are now also looking towards adding a bit more salt to the injury by maybe filing for criminal negligence against both our landlord and the neighbor. The first because the apartment was apparently having some flaws, and the latter for endangering us. Had I not caught up on what caused the sound earlier, me, or, God forbid, my roommate could have been under that. Anyway, it was a fun week, and I do enjoy the accommodations of my hotel. Never went to a 4-star spa-included hotel before. Turns out the chocolate on the pillow is a lie, and I am very disappointed about that. TLDR, my neighbor was a noisy bastard that went through the floor with his weightlifting equipment, and my landlord ignored me when I complained about the noise. Edit. As I have advised to a few commentators, I followed up with my roommate, and she did not take pictures of the event. She got a bit mad, I asked, considering what just happened, and questioned my priorities. I then explained that our Reddit story got a lot of attention, and some people in the comments requested some visual proof. I will spare you her answer. I will just add that it's okay not to believe the story based on my word alone. If people actually didn't question it, I would be worried. When I posted this story, my only intent was to share my experience, and I thought, malicious compliance, neat. If there was a horrible landlord, bad neighbor Reddit I would have found prior to submitting this story, probably would have went there instead. I will also add that I am not an expert or an engineer. How and why something like weights and the like would cause part of the floor to collapse, I cannot say. Was there a structural damage prior? Was there water damage that never was addressed, just covered up? Was the structure just not as sound as I believed it was when I got in? I cannot say. I understand some of you might have worked in construction and never have experienced such an event, or have actual reasons to suspect a lie due to personal and professional experience. Once again, you can and should question anything on the internet. I just hope you also apply that kind of skepticism, and I mean wanting proof or the opinion of an actual expert prior to making a decision, to more than just Reddit posts. For those who made us laugh, and those who have spoken to us who have been encouraging and constructive, people who actually gave us advice, I thank you very much. It was very nice of everyone, and I wish you the best. Update. My brother has agreed to take the case and look at the options. We are not feeling very vindictive, and our insurance are going to cover most of the costs, so we might file for negligence. I'm not a lawyer myself, I don't know the terms in English, but basically, the landlord should have had his building inspected before renting, which was apparently not done. Landlord has apparently calmed down after the events and has apologized for everything. He has scheduled a visit from an inspector to check the integrity of the apartment and the cause of the damage that would have allowed a human and exercise equipment to go through the floor and ceiling. In exchange for not pressing charges, he has agreed to reimburse all the money we have invested into the rent, our stay at the hotel, and a little extra as an apology, and the guarantee to either repair the apartment and soundproof it properly, or if it is not an option to go back, he will relocate us onto another of his building, which are a lot better than what we had, reduce our rent quite significantly for as long as we stay, with papers to back his offer up, and a full year of free rent. This is actually quite generous in the current rent market. I'm leaving the final say to roommate. On my end, I was not injured, she was not, and this could have been just a freak accident. Yes, the landlord is a bit of an ass, but let's be honest, we all had worse, landlord-wise. Plus, even if we take him up on his offers, the upstairs neighbor might be looking for some severe reparation. He did get injured after all. But we would be happy to hear about your opinion. What would you say? Take this further or just take the refund, plus the full year, rent-free year, and then low rent for the years to come? Last update, April 9th, 2022. After a long time deciding what to do, we have opted to take the landlord's offer. However, we made it clear that we could not live under the same people if the soundproofing was not at the very least improved. We went to my brother's office and met with a colleague of his who multiple documents for us to sign. One of them for the promise of low rent. Landlord wanted to offer $250 off the market price. We negotiated it up to $300 to be applied on all our leases. We have also agreed to the reimbursement of 6 months of rent, which will cover us for the next year and then some, plus the free year. We received about $5,000 each, and the landlord has agreed to cover all the costs of the hotel we and our parent had to pay. We might be moving back into our apartment by the end of the month. It's a bit disappointing as we kind of wanted to try another place, but from what I understand, there is a very good chance our neighbors are not moving back on their end, so it might just be back to the ideal scenario. There will be very heavy renovation done and a thorough inspection of the structure before we move back in. The next one is an entitled people story. This was back in 2016. My ex-husband and I just moved into our new house in October 2016. My friend Susan, her 3 girls and 2 dogs were getting evicted from their residence in November. I offered them a temporary place to stay until they found a permanent place. The kids were the same age as my kids and were in the same activities. I thought they would be there for 1-2 months and find a place. The first month was fine. We set chore schedules for each our kids and everyone was getting along. Starting month 2, Susan and her girls started to see the house as theirs and we were an inconvenience to them. Susan was not able to find a place due to her eviction and she quit looking for places. When my family wanted to cook dinner, take a shower, or watch TV on one of the 2 family rooms, it was an issue. They started to complain about having to do chores around the house. One of the girls, 10, was sharing a room with one of my daughters and making my daughter feel unwelcome in her own room. The final straw came when my daughter had a birthday party and I asked them to find another place to stay for the weekend. Susan had a fit when she found out her daughter was not invited to the birthday party. My daughter did not want to invite her as she was sick of the daughter and her friends did not like her daughter. Susan yelled at my daughter and told her she was a spoiled brat and selfish for not inviting her daughter. Susan also made several derogatory remarks to my daughters after this about how they need to mind their own business and quit being bratty. My ex-husband had enough. He told me they had to go and gave Susan an eviction notice of 30 days. The next 30 days was horrible. The youngest daughter kept telling my 2 daughters it was their fault they were getting kicked out of their house. Fortunately, they spent most of the time at Susan's BF house, but when they were here, it was a nightmare. She did not pack anything until moving day. So, my family bagged everything in black garbage bags and boxes and put them on our front porch. We took pictures of everything as we know her history of being vindictive. We had a family friend come over to be here as a witness just in case anything happened when she came to get her stuff. She was welcome to come in the house to make sure she had everything but never rang the doorbell or came in the house. We thought everything was fine. 3 months later, we received a summons on the mail that we were being sued for missing items. We couldn't believe it. She sued us for over $750 of missing items. There was nothing missing. We made sure of it. We wanted nothing of hers. We filed a counterclaim for damages she made to the house for more than the amount of her claim. We were hoping we could get her to drop her claim with our claim or the offset her claim by ours day of court. She had 2 claims that day. She also sued an ex-boyfriend for 2 jet skis he was storing. He said he sold the jet skis to offset the fees for fixing them. He also unknowingly had her ex-boyfriend's stolen car at his house, and the cops showed to get the car. We tried to negotiate with her, and she said no. The judge was not impressed with her having 2 claims in one day and not being prepared. Needless to say, we won our case. Well, a month later we received notification she appealed, and we had to go back to court over this. She asked for a continuance as she said she did not know there was a hearing. The judge was not impressed. The judge pretty much told Susan if this showed back up in her courtroom, the judgment would be the same. This time she would also have to pay for our lawyer fees as well. After a month of messing around and a day before court, she finally signed the court documents to drop her case against us. To this day, she tells everyone how we screwed her and treated her badly. We just tried to help a family in need and give them shelter for several months when they didn't have anywhere else to go. I am not sure I will do that again. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.